Listen carefully. This is not an attack on you. This is not shame. This is not motivation for a moment. This is the truth. You work hard. You wake up early. You show up. You try to be responsible. You pay your bills. You avoid trouble. You do what you were told would work. Study. Work. Be patient. Be grateful. Don't complain. And yet, nothing really changes. Years pass. Your effort increases. Your stress increases. Your responsibilities grow heavier, but freedom does not. You are busy all the time, but your position stays the same. You move faster, but you are not moving forward. And deep inside, there is a quiet fear. Not panic, not drama. A slow fear. A fear that this is your life. A fear that this is as far as you go. A fear that one day you will look back and realize you spent decades surviving, but never building. You see others move ahead, not always smarter than you, not always harder working than you, but somehow ahead. New opportunities, more control, more choice. And you wonder, quietly, what am I missing? You don't say this out loud. You smile. You say you're fine. You say it's okay, life is hard. But the fear stays. This video is not here to comfort that fear, and it is not here to judge you for it. It is here to explain why most people stay poor forever. Not poor in talent, not poor in effort, but poor in position, poor in options, poor in freedom. This is not about blaming you, because this problem did not start with you. You were trained into it, conditioned into it, taught to believe certain rules that quietly keep you where you are. And while you listen, your English will improve, not by memorizing rules, not by forcing yourself, but by listening, by understanding, by slowing down your mind, slowly, naturally, without pressure. But only if you do one thing. Do not skip. Do not multitask. Do not listen halfway. Give this your full attention. Listen until the end. Because the real reason most people never escape is not what you think. Most people think poverty means having little money. They look at their bank account and see the problem there. If I had more money, they think, everything would be easier. If I earned more, I would finally relax. If I reached a certain number, my life would begin. This belief feels logical. It feels practical. And that is why it is dangerous, because it hides the real problem. Real poverty is not empty pockets. Real poverty is a trapped way of thinking. You can earn more money and still feel afraid. You can get a better job and still feel insecure. You can save money and still feel stressed every night. Many people live like this. From the outside, they look fine. From the inside, they are tense, always calculating, always worried, always waiting for the next problem. Why? Because money does not remove fear, only understanding does. Let me explain. When someone lives in poverty for a long time, their mind adapts. Just like the body adapts to cold or heat, the mind adapts to pressure. At first, poverty feels shocking. Then it feels stressful. Then it becomes normal. The brain learns one lesson above all others: survive. Not grow, not explore, not experiment. Survive. So thinking becomes short-term, very short-term. Today, this week, this month. Bills first, problems first, urgency first, fear first. When fear comes first, everything else is pushed aside. There is no space for vision, no space for long-term planning, no space for mistakes, no space for growth. This is not because the person is stupid. It is because the system trained them this way. When every mistake feels expensive, you stop taking risks. When every delay feels dangerous, you stop waiting. When every loss feels fatal, you stop experimenting. This thinking becomes automatic. You don't sit down and decide to think this way. Your nervous system does it for you. This is mental poverty, and mental poverty is powerful. It follows you even when money changes. This is why many people win the lottery and lose everything. At first, they feel relief, then excitement, then confusion. They spend fast, they trust the wrong people, they avoid learning, they avoid responsibility. Why? Because their mindset never changed. They still think short term. They still avoid planning. They still fear losing. So instead of building control, they try to escape discomfort. The money came, but the mindset stayed the same. This is also why athletes can earn millions and still go broke. They trained their bodies, they trained their skills, but no one trained their thinking. Suddenly, money arrives faster than understanding, and without understanding, money becomes unstable. It leaks, it disappears, it creates chaos instead of freedom. Poverty is not the absence of money, it is the absence of options. When you have options, life feels lighter. You can say no, you can wait, you can negotiate, you can walk away. When you have no options, every decision feels heavy. You accept bad work, not because you like it, but because you feel trapped. You accept bad treatment, not because you deserve it, but because you fear losing stability. You accept bad deals, not because you agree, but because you see no alternative. This is how poverty stays alive. It does not shout, it whispers. It teaches you to ask small questions. How do I survive this month? How do I avoid trouble? How do I stay safe? These questions are not wrong. They keep you alive, but they also keep you stuck. Because there is another question, a dangerous question, a freeing question. How do I change my position? Position is not salary. Position is not effort. Position is where you stand in the system. Do you have leverage? Do you have skills that scale? Do you have knowledge that compounds? Do you have time to think? Most people never ask this question, not because they're lazy, but because they're exhausted. They're busy surviving, busy reacting, busy fixing small problems created by bigger patterns. By the time the day ends, there is no energy left to think deeply, and fear helps keep it that way. Fear says, now is not the time. Be careful. Don't risk what little you have. So the question is delayed. Tomorrow, next year, someday. But someday never comes. This is not a personal failure. It is a learned response. If you were raised in pressure, you learned pressure thinking. If you were rewarded for obedience, you learned obedience. If you were punished for mistakes, you learned avoidance. None of this means you're weak. It means you adapted, and adaptation is intelligence. The problem is not that you adapted. The problem is that the environment changed, but the thinking did not. Once you see this, something important happens. You stop blaming yourself. You stop saying, there must be something wrong with me. Blame drains energy. Blame creates shame, and shame keeps you small. When blame disappears, clarity begins. Clarity allows you to observe your own patterns without panic. You begin to notice how often fear decides for you, how often urgency controls your day, how often you trade long-term gain for short-term relief. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is powerful, because what you can see, you can change. Mental poverty survives in darkness. It weakens under observation. The moment you understand that poverty is not just money, you stop chasing numbers blindly. You start asking better questions about systems, about leverage, about position, about time. This does not mean instant escape, it means direction, and direction matters more than speed. This clarity is the first step out. Fear is quiet. It does not shout. It does not announce itself. It does not say, "I am fear." It whispers. It speaks in a calm voice, a reasonable voice, a voice that sounds like intelligence. It tells you to be careful. It tells you to wait. It tells you this is not the right time. It tells you to stay where you are. And because it sounds logical, you listen. Fear asks questions that feel responsible. What if you fail? What if you lose everything? What if people judge you? What if you regret it? These questions feel mature. They feel adult. They feel smart. So you stop. You delay. You hesitate. You choose safety over growth. You choose comfort over progress. This is how the cage is built. Not with walls, not with locks, but with thoughts. Most people believe fear protects them. They believe fear keeps them safe. They believe fear prevents disaster. They believe fear is a warning system. But fear does something else. Fear shrinks choices. When you are afraid, your world becomes small. You do not think about next year. You think about next week. You do not think about opportunity. You think about loss. You do not ask, "What could I become?" You ask, "What could go wrong?" Fear turns life into defense. You are no longer building, you are protecting. Protecting your income, protecting your reputation, protecting your routine, protecting your comfort. And a defensive life never grows. Growth requires exposure. Growth requires uncertainty. Growth requires risk. Fear cannot allow that. This is why fear is so powerful. It does not need chains. It does not need force. You lock yourself in. Fear tells you to be patient, but it never tells you when. Fear tells you to prepare more, but preparation never feels complete. Fear tells you to wait until you feel ready, but ready never arrives. So years pass. You get older. You get more responsible. You get more careful, but not more free. Fear slowly trains you. It trains you to avoid discomfort. It trains you to avoid attention. It trains you to avoid mistakes. Over time, fear becomes your default setting. When a new idea appears, fear responds first. When an opportunity appears, fear speaks before curiosity. When pressure appears, fear takes control. This is how fear makes people obedient. Not obedient to authority, obedient to circumstances. They do not ask for more. They do not negotiate. They do not challenge. They say yes too fast. They accept conditions they do not like. They accept rules they did not create, not because they are weak, because fear decides for them. Fear tells them, don't push too hard, don't make trouble, be grateful. Others have it worse. So they stay quiet. Fear also kills experimentation. Experimentation means failure. Failure means exposure. Exposure means judgment. So fear says no. Do not try. Do not test. Do not explore. Stay with what you know. But what you know is exactly what's keeping you stuck. Fear makes people repeat the same patterns while expecting different results. They change jobs, but keep the same thinking. They move cities, but bring the same fear. They change routines, but protect the same comfort. So the cage moves with them. Over time, fear becomes invisible. You stop noticing it. You call it being realistic. You call it being responsible. You call it being mature. You say, I'm just not that kind of person. I prefer stability. I don't like risk. But deep inside, there is a quiet signal, a discomfort you cannot explain, a tension that never leaves, a feeling that something is wrong. That feeling is important. It is not anxiety. It is awareness. It means part of you knows this is not freedom. Freedom does not feel like constant caution. Freedom does not feel like permanent delay. Freedom does not feel like holding your breath. Fear also lies about time. It says, later is safer. Later is better. Later will be easier. But later is where fear hides, because fear grows stronger with delay. Every time you avoid discomfort, fear learns that avoidance works. Every time you choose safety, fear gains authority. So next time, it speaks louder. And eventually, fear no longer asks. It commands. It decides what you can try. It decides what you deserve. It decides how far you can go. This is the invisible cage. You cannot escape it by running faster. You cannot escape it by working harder. You cannot escape it by staying busy, because fear feeds on speed. Speed prevents thinking. Busyness prevents reflection. Fear only weakens under observation. You escape fear by seeing it clearly, not fighting it, not denying it, seeing it. Seeing how often fear appears before you even think, seeing how fear frames every decision as a threat, seeing how fear exaggerates loss and minimizes possibility. Once you see fear, it loses power. Not all power, but enough. Enough for a pause, enough for a question. Is this fear or is this reality? Often it is fear. And when fear loses power, options return. You begin to see choices where you once saw walls. You begin to consider paths you once dismissed. You begin to tolerate uncertainty without panic. Fear does not disappear completely. It never does. But it stops controlling you. You stop asking, how do I avoid loss? You start asking, what is the cost of staying the same? That question changes everything, because the biggest danger is not failure. The biggest danger is living inside a cage you never realized was there. Fear is the invisible cage, but once you see it, the door is already open. Busyness feels good. It gives you a sense of movement, a sense of purpose, a sense that you are doing something with your life. When you are busy, you feel useful. You feel needed. You feel important. You wake up with a full schedule, messages waiting, tasks lined up, problems to solve. And because you are moving all day, you do not feel lazy. In today's world, this matters. Busyness is praised. People say, "I'm so busy," as if it is a badge of honor. They say it with pride. They say it to prove value. They say it to avoid silence. Busy means responsible. Busy means serious. Busy means successful. Or so it seems. But listen carefully. Busyness is not freedom. Busyness is often distraction. It feels like progress, but it is usually motion without direction. When your day is full, your mind is empty. You move from task to task, message to message, meeting to meeting, problem to problem. There is always something demanding your attention. And because there is always something urgent, there is never time to think. Not real thinking. Thinking requires space. Thinking requires silence. Thinking requires slowness. Busyness destroys all three. This is why busyness is dangerous. It keeps you tired, not physically tired at first, mentally tired. Your attention is fragmented. Your energy is scattered. Your mind is always reacting. When you are tired, you do not question. You accept what is in front of you. You do what is required. You move on. Busyness also keeps you reactive. Reactive people respond to pressure. They do not shape it. They answer emails, they handle complaints, they fix mistakes, they chase deadlines, all day. But reaction is not control. If your life is only reaction, your life belongs to whoever sets the agenda, and it is rarely you. Busyness keeps you small, not in ability, but in position. You may be skilled, you may be intelligent, you may be capable, but if you are always busy, you never step back far enough to see where you are standing. The system loves busy people. Busy people do not question the system. They don't have time. Busy people do not plan long term. They plan tomorrow. Busy people do not prepare for change. They are trying to survive the present. Busy people solve today's problems created by yesterday's decisions, again and again and again. This creates a loop. Every day feels full, every week feels productive, every month disappears, but your position stays the same. Your income may increase slightly, your responsibilities increase faster, your stress increases constantly. This is the prison, not made of bars, not made of guards, made of schedules, made of notifications, made of urgency, of other people's priorities. You are allowed to move, but only inside the cage. Many people stay poor not because they lack ability. They stay poor because they never stop long enough to see the pattern. Busyness hides patterns. When you are always busy, everything feels unique. Every problem feels new. Every crisis feels special. But if you slow down, you notice something uncomfortable. The same problems repeat, the same stress returns, the same compromises are made. Different names, same structure. Busyness prevents this realization because realization requires reflection, and reflection feels dangerous when your identity is built on productivity. If you stop, who are you? If you rest, are you lazy? If you say no, will you be replaced? These fears keep people moving even when movement is pointless. Busyness also creates a false sense of importance. When people need you constantly, you feel valuable. When problems depend on you, you feel necessary. But necessity is not leverage. If everything depends on you, you cannot step away. If you cannot step away, you are not free. Freedom requires distance. Distance allows you to see systems instead of tasks. Tasks keep you busy. Systems determine outcomes. Busy people manage tasks. Free people design systems. But you cannot design a system from within constant urgency. When you are always busy, you cannot step back. And without stepping back, you cannot step forward. This is why some people work harder every year, but feel poorer in control. They are efficient prisoners. They optimize their cage. They wake up earlier. They move faster. They multitask better. But the structure remains the same. Busyness also kills creativity. Creativity requires boredom. It requires mental wandering. It requires unstructured time. A busy mind cannot wander. It can only react. So new ideas fade. Better paths remain unseen. Opportunities pass quietly. The world does not reward busyness. It rewards clarity. Clarity comes from thinking. Thinking comes from time. Time must be protected, not filled, not sold. Protected. Freedom begins when you protect your time, not to work more, not to do more, but to think better. Thinking better means asking hard questions. Why am I always busy? Who benefits from this urgency? What problems keep repeating? What am I avoiding by staying busy? These questions feel uncomfortable. That is why busyness exists. Busyness numbs discomfort. It gives you something to do instead of something to confront. But the moment you create space, the prison becomes visible, and once you see it, you can no longer pretend. Busyness is the new prison, and the key is not effort. The key is awareness. Slow down enough to see. When life becomes difficult, you hear the same advice again and again. Just work harder. It comes from parents, from teachers, from managers, from society. It is repeated so often that it sounds like truth. It sounds strong. It sounds responsible. It sounds moral. Hard work feels clean. Effort feels fair. If you work hard and fail, at least you can say you tried. This is why the advice is powerful. But this advice hides a lie. Working harder is easy to say when you do not understand the system. When someone is stuck, people rarely ask about structure. They ask about effort. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. Maybe you need to push more. Maybe you need to sacrifice more. So when things go wrong, you blame effort. You think, I just need to work longer hours. I just need to say yes more. I just need to be tougher. This thinking feels noble. It feels disciplined, and it slowly destroys you. Because hard work without direction does not create freedom. It creates exhaustion. Exhaustion is not just physical, it is mental. When you are exhausted, your thinking becomes narrow. You stop asking questions. You stop imagining alternatives. You stop challenging assumptions. Exhausted people do not change systems. They obey them. They follow rules without understanding them. They accept conditions without questioning them. They comply because they are too tired to resist. When you are tired, you accept less. You accept lower pay because you cannot afford conflict. You accept more pressure because you cannot afford uncertainty. You accept unfair rules because you cannot afford to start over. Not because you agree, but because you are drained. This is how just work harder keeps people poor. It turns structural problems into personal failure. If the system is unfair, you blame yourself. If the path is broken, you blame your effort. If the reward never comes, you assume you are not worthy enough. This belief is convenient for the system because a tired person does not question the path. They stay on it. They walk faster. They carry more. And when they collapse, they are replaced. Hard work becomes a trap when it is disconnected from strategy. Imagine using a hammer for everything. A hammer is useful, but if it is the only tool you use, everything looks like a nail. Every problem becomes effort. Every solution becomes sacrifice. You never ask, is this the right tool? You never ask, is this the right direction? You just swing harder. This is why many people work harder every year but feel poorer and control. They are productive, they are reliable, they are praised, but they are not free. Hard work also hides a dangerous belief, the belief that suffering equals progress. If you are tired, you must be doing something right. If you are stressed, you must be important. If you are overwhelmed, you must be valuable. But suffering is not proof of progress. Sometimes it is proof of misalignment. Sometimes it means you are applying effort to the wrong place. Hard work should be a multiplier, not a replacement for thinking. Thinking is uncomfortable. It requires slowing down. It requires questioning what you were taught, and questioning feels risky. So people choose effort instead. Effort feels safe. Effort feels controllable. You can always work harder. You can always stay later. You can always give more. But effort without leverage has limits. Leverage means results without equal effort. It means skills that scale, systems that work without constant input, positions that protect your time. Hard work alone does not create leverage. It often destroys the ability to build it, because leverage requires clarity, and clarity requires energy. Exhausted people cannot see leverage. They can only see the next task. This is why the people who escape poverty do not escape by pushing harder. At some point, they stop. Not forever, but long enough. They step back. They look at the system. They ask uncomfortable questions. Is this path even leading somewhere? Who benefits from my effort? What happens if I continue like this for 10 years? What am I building, really? These questions are dangerous to a system that depends on obedience, because once you see that effort is being extracted without proportional reward, you can't unsee it. The people who escape change their relationship with effort. They still work hard, but not blindly. They choose where effort goes. They choose when effort matters. They refuse effort that only maintains stagnation. They look at timing. Is now the moment to push or the moment to prepare? They look at position. Does this role give me options or does it trap me? They look at systems. Does this system reward results or does it reward endurance? Then they move. Not faster, smarter. This is uncomfortable to accept because it means hard work alone was never enough. It means effort without awareness was wasted, and that hurts. But clarity always hurts before it frees. The lie of just work harder is comforting at first. It gives you something to do. It gives you hope that effort will save you. But over time, it steals your future. Because while you are busy pushing, you are not steering. If you want to move forward, this is the lie you must drop. Not the value of hard work, but the belief that hard work is the answer to everything. Hard work is a tool. Thinking is the strategy. Leverage is the goal. And freedom begins when effort finally serves direction instead of replacing it. Most people believe escape will come later. Later when they earn more. Later when life is calmer. Later when responsibilities are lighter. Later when they feel ready. Later becomes a promise, a quiet promise you make to yourself to survive today. If I can just get through this year, if I can just stabilize, then I'll think about change. But later never arrives. Not because you are unlucky, not because you are incapable, because the problem is not time. The problem is patterns. Time does not create change. Patterns create outcomes. Most people spend their lives changing the surface of their life while protecting the structure underneath. They change jobs, they change companies, they change titles, they change cities, they change countries, they change environments, they change routines, they change schedules, they change habits, but they do not change how they think. So the same results follow them. New place, same stress. New job, same fear. New role, same anxiety. The names are different, the faces are different, but the experience feels familiar. This is why escape feels impossible. From the inside, it feels like bad luck. From the outside, it looks like repetition. The system outside changes, but the system inside stays the same. And the system inside is the one making decisions. People repeat the same choices under new conditions. They tell themselves, this time will be different. But when pressure appears, they react the same way. Fear appears. Urgency increases. They choose safety again. Not because safety is best, but because it feels familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. This is how patterns survive. Patterns do not announce themselves. They hide inside habits, inside reflexes, inside automatic reactions. When stress appears, you do not think, you react, and reaction is where patterns live. Escape requires something rare. Honest reflection, not positive thinking, not motivation. reflection. Reflection means stopping long enough to look at your own behavior without excuses. It means asking questions that make you uncomfortable. Why does my life keep repeating? Why do I end up in the same situation? Why do I make the same compromises? Why do I accept the same limits? Most people never ask these questions, not because they do not care, but because they are exhausted. They are too busy surviving, too busy reacting, too busy solving immediate problems to examine long-term patterns. Survival mode is loud. It demands attention. It demands energy. It demands compliance. Reflection is quiet. It requires space. It requires silence. It requires courage. And courage is hard to access when you are tired. There's also fear. Fear of what you might discover. Because if you see the pattern, you can no longer blame circumstances alone. You may see that some decisions were driven by fear, some compromises were repeated, some risks were avoided again and again. Seeing this hurts, so the mind avoids it. It stays busy. It stays distracted. It stays hopeful about later. Later is comfortable. Later allows you to believe change will happen without confrontation. But patterns do not break themselves. They repeat until they are seen. This is why most people never escape. Not because they are incapable, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack effort, but because they never pause long enough to see the cage. The cage is not external, it is internal. It is made of habits, beliefs, and reflexes. Once you see the pattern, something shifts. You stop feeling unlucky. You stop feeling cursed. You stop feeling confused. You begin to see structure. You begin to see how fear enters at the same moments, how urgency forces the same choices, how comfort pulls you back. This awareness does not free you instantly, but it gives you leverage, because patterns only control you when they are invisible. The moment you see them, you gain a pause between stimulus and response, and in that pause, there's choice. Choice is the beginning of escape. But seeing requires courage. Courage to slow down. Courage to look honestly. Courage to accept responsibility without self-hatred. This is not about blame. Blame is useless. This is about ownership. Ownership of patterns. Ownership of reactions. Ownership of decisions. You were trained into these patterns, but you are not trapped by them. The moment you stop waiting for later and start observing now, the cycle weakens. Escape does not begin with action. It begins with awareness. And awareness begins when you are willing to see what you have been avoiding. That is why most people never escape. And that is why, once you do, escape becomes possible. The difference between the 99% and the 1% is not talent. It is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is not education. Those explanations are comforting because they remove responsibility, but they are not true. The real difference is how people respond to pressure. Pressure reveals patterns. When pressure appears, most people feel urgency. Bills arrive, deadlines tighten, unexpected problems appear. The body reacts first. The heart speeds up. The mind narrows. Fear takes the wheel. The 99% rush. They hurry to fix the problem. They hurry to restore comfort. They hurry to feel safe again. Speed feels like control. Moving fast feels productive. Doing something feels better than sitting with discomfort. So they react. They answer immediately. They accept quickly. They decide under pressure. But speed is not control. Speed is often panic disguised as action. The faster you move without clarity, the deeper you lock in the pattern. The 1% do something different. When pressure appears, they slow down. Not forever, not passively. They pause, they breathe, they observe. They create distance between the problem and their response. This pause creates power, because in the pause, thinking becomes possible. The 99% ask, "What do I need to do right now?" This question feels practical, it feels urgent, it feels responsible. But it is a short-term question. It focuses on relief, not resolution. The 1% ask a different question. Why is this happening? Not emotionally, not defensively, structurally. What caused this situation? What pattern led here? Who benefits from this pressure? What does this reveal about the system? These questions feel slower, but they go deeper. The 99% focus on income. How much can I earn this month? How can I increase my hours? How can I work harder? Income feels tangible, immediate, reassuring. The 1% focus on leverage. Leverage means results without equal effort. It means one decision affects many outcomes. Leverage is not magic, it is structure. Skills that scale, knowledge that compounds, systems that continue working without constant input. The 99% sell time. They trade hours for money. They are paid for presence. When they stop, income stops. Time becomes the limit. There are only so many hours, so many days, so much energy. The 1% build assets, not only financial assets, mental assets, understanding, clarity, judgment. They invest in learning how systems work, how incentives shape behavior, how power flows, how value is created and captured. They build options. Options are the real currency. When you have options, pressure loses its grip. The 99% wait for stability. They say, "I'll think long-term when things calm down. I'll plan when life is less stressful. I'll prepare when I feel safe." But stability rarely arrives, and when it does not last. The 1% prepare during instability. They know chaos reveals weaknesses. They know pressure exposes truth. They know crisis accelerates change. While others rush to survive, they observe. They study what breaks. They notice who panics. They watch where value shifts. This is why crisis breaks some people and lifts others. The difference is not the event. The difference is the mindset before the event. The 99% experience pressure as a threat. The 1% experience pressure as information. Information about systems, information about themselves, information about opportunity. The 99% copy the crowd. When fear spreads, they follow. If everyone is rushing, they rush. If everyone is hiding, they hide. Crowds feel safe, but crowds move slowly and think poorly. The 1% step away from the crowd, not because they are fearless, but because they are deliberate. They understand that safety is not found in numbers, it is found in position. Position means where you stand when conditions change. Do you have flexibility? Do you have control over your time? Do you have access to information? Do you have the ability to wait? Most people never think about position. They think about effort. Effort is visible. Position is invisible. But position determines outcomes. Two people can work equally hard and end up in completely different places because their positions are different. One is replaceable, the other is not. One reacts, the other chooses. One is dependent, the other has options. Once you understand this, something changes. You stop copying the crowd. You stop chasing safety in places where safety does not exist. You stop measuring success only by speed and effort. You begin to ask better questions. Does this role give me leverage? Does this skill compound? Does this decision expand my options or reduce them? You begin to tolerate discomfort, not recklessly, intelligently. You allow uncertainty long enough to see clearly. This does not make you special, it makes you intentional. The difference between the 99% and the 1% is not who they are, it's how they think under pressure. Anyone can rush, few can pause. Anyone can work harder, few can step back and redesign. Anyone can chase income, few can build leverage. When you understand this, you stop asking, how do I move faster? You start asking, how do I stand better? Because speed without position leads to exhaustion, but position changes everything. It changes how pressure affects you. It changes how options appear. It changes how the future opens. This is the real difference, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. From that moment on, pressure no longer controls you, it informs you, and that is power. English is not just a language. It is a tool of access. Most people do not see it this way. They learn English to pass exams, to get certificates, to meet requirements, to feel educated. They memorize vocabulary. They study grammar rules. They chase scores. This is surface learning. It looks useful, but it rarely changes anything important. Because the real power of English is not in exams. It is deeper. English is the language of systems, business systems, financial systems, legal systems, technological systems, global communication. The rules of the modern world are written in English. When companies negotiate, they use English. When contracts are written, they are often in English. When ideas spread globally, they spread in English. When policies, standards, and frameworks are created, English is usually the base language. This is not about culture. It is about access. When you do not understand English, you depend on others. You depend on translations. You depend on summaries. You depend on explanations. You depend on opinions. Dependence is weakness. Not because you are inferior, not because you are less intelligent, but because you cannot verify. You cannot check contracts yourself. You cannot read original documents. You cannot study opportunities deeply. You cannot understand how decisions are framed. So you follow. You accept what is explained to you. You trust what is summarized for you. You believe what is filtered for you. And filters always remove power. The 99% learn English as a subject. They treat it like mathematics, like history, like something to pass. They ask, what is the correct answer? What is the rule? What score do I need? The 1% use English as a lens to see how the world works. They do not ask, how perfect is my grammar? They ask, what is really being said here? What is the intention behind these words? What assumptions are hidden in this message? They use English to observe systems. They read how companies describe themselves. They listen to how leaders speak under pressure. They study how value is explained, not just what is promised. This is a different relationship with language. When you listen to English carefully, you train your mind to slow down, to observe, to think clearly. Each time you listen without rushing, you weaken fear. Each time you understand context, you strengthen judgment. Each time you see how ideas are built, you gain leverage. You move one step away from dependence on translations, dependence on opinions, dependence on authority. and one step closer to freedom. Freedom is not loud. It is quiet. It feels like calm understanding. It feels like patience. It feels like control. English, used correctly, does not make you powerful overnight. It makes you less manipulable. And that's where power begins. Not in speaking fast, not in sounding perfect, but in seeing clearly. This is how English fits into everything you have heard. It is not a subject, it is a lens. And once you look through it long enough, you don't just understand the language, you understand the system. And understanding the system is how patterns finally break. Listen to me carefully. You were not broken. Nothing about you is missing. Nothing about you is defective. Nothing about you needs to be fixed. You were trained. Trained by your environment. Trained by pressure. Trained by necessity. You were trained to survive, to rush when problems appear, to accept less when fear speaks, to move quickly instead of thinking deeply. This training kept you alive. It helped you adapt. It helped you endure. But survival training is not freedom training. And now you see the difference. You see why effort alone was never enough. You see why working harder did not change the outcome. You see why every cycle felt familiar, even when the details changed. You see why fear kept you small, not because you lacked courage, but because fear was never questioned. You see why the pattern repeated, not because life was against you, but because reactions stayed the same under pressure. This understanding is important, but it is also dangerous, because once you see, you cannot unsee. This knowledge is not meant to make you angry. Anger feels powerful, but it fades quickly. This knowledge is meant to make you aware. Awareness is quieter than anger, but it lasts longer. Awareness allows you to pause, and pause is where freedom begins. From today, you do not move blindly. You do not rush just because others rush. You do not react just because pressure appears. You do not accept limits just because they feel familiar. You pause. You observe. You notice how fear enters the conversation. You notice how urgency tries to control timing. You notice how comfort tries to pull you back. And then you choose. Choice does not mean reckless action. Choice does not mean dramatic change overnight. Choice means response instead of reaction. It means asking one better question before saying yes. It means waiting a little longer before deciding. It means noticing patterns instead of getting lost in details. This is how change actually happens, not in one moment, not in one decision, but in how you respond again and again. If this lesson stayed with you, if something inside you shifted, do not ignore it. That quiet shift matters more than loud motivation. Motivation fades. Awareness stays. This moment is your signal, not to quit your life, not to escape overnight, not to chase unrealistic promises, but to rebuild your thinking, to rebuild how you see pressure, how you see effort, how you see time, how you see yourself. That is why this channel exists, not for entertainment, not for noise, not for empty motivation. Subscribe to join a community of people doing something rare, people slowing down in a world that rushes, people thinking clearly in a world that reacts, people rebuilding their confidence, not through hype, but through understanding. Every lesson you listen to is not just information, it is repetition. Repetition is how patterns break. Each time you listen, you strengthen awareness. Each time you pause instead of rushing, you weaken fear. Each time you question instead of obeying, you gain ground. This is a long process, and that is good. Anything fast is fragile. Anything deep takes time. One lesson at a time. One story at a time. You do not need to change everything today. You only need to see clearly today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. You were trained to survive. Now you are learning to choose. This is not the end. This is your beginning.